Alright, hello everyone. In this video, we'll be talking about the 40k factions I don't play, and this time it's about the Armies of Chaos. So, by the nature of it, Chaos Space Marines are going to be excluded from this because they are an army I do actively play that are from Chaos. Starting off of Chaos Demons, my thoughts on them are generally speaking very similar to the Imperial Agents. They're an army that never interested me, and they're also an army that basically come off as you just soup them into other armies. You ally them in. You're not really supposed to take them as their own standalone army. That isn't meant to say that they can't be taken alone as a standalone army or that you shouldn't. Just from my opinion, in my perspective, they are an army where you just ally them in. I do think that their models look really cool, though I'm not a fan of 40k Warhammer 40k using or reusing some Warhammer Fantasy or Age of Sigmar models for demons, but most of the models that tend to reuse that kind of stuff would be like Bloodletters, your basic lesser demons, or the named greater demons like Be'lakor, Scarbrand, whatever have you. But overall, I think Chaos Demons are not particularly great. They've never interested me personally. Their army rule, from what I've read, just kind of comes across as a tad bit confusing. Not too dissimilar to the Imperial Agents. But for those people who do really enjoy playing Chaos Demons as their army, their preferred army, more power to you. Personally, not my thing, but I understand why some people would. Next off is Chaos Knights. Now, a lot of what I said about the Imperial Knights, like they look really cool, they're big mechs, therefore they're cool, it very much still applies, right? Chaos Knights are basically the same thing as, or very similar to, Imperial Knights. I know in terms of their models and their war gear options, they're basically the same between each other, just different names. In comparison to Imperial Knights, I think they look better. I think their models just overall look cooler, and it mostly comes down to Chaos Knights have more to them than just basically empty armor panels. On top of that, like in the case of the big knight that there's an image of, his melee weapon's basically whip tentacles. That's kind of cool. I personally wouldn't put that on him, but that's pretty cool looking. They're big mechs, just like Imperial Knights, therefore they are cool. You can fight me about that in the comments, but I'm right. And then, all that. Now, I think that, pre-Codex, their army rule is very disappointing because it has a lot to do with battle shocking. It makes sense thematically, but battle shocking, or battle shock as a condition in 10th edition from 40k, from what I know of it and experienced, just seems so underwhelming and lacking. Granted, that's something that could change in the future, and this is also my opinions about their army rule before their codexes come out. I don't know what their army rule is like when the codex does come out, but whenever their codex releases and New Recruit and Wahapedia get updated, I will definitely be trying a Chaos Knight army, especially with the detachment. I've heard rumored that they basically have Dark Pact as a detachment rule, and that I'm a big fan of that. I like Chaos Space Marines, I like Dark Pacting, so yes, please give me more of that. Next up is the Death Guard, the first of the Chaos Cult armies. Now, in terms of their models, like how they look and all that, they look stinky and poopy, but that's kind of the point. They're supposed to look disgusting and fetid and gross. Obviously, when you paint them like Death Guard, they're going to look like Death Guard. They're going to look gross because of their sickly green and pus-covered skin and what have you. With regards to their army rule, it is very simple to understand, like how the Nurgle's Gift aura works, and then how the plagues work. If you play, and especially if you play, the Virulent Victorium detachment. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the first word. But that's the plague marine detachment. It's from the index. Very simple, very straightforward. It just expands upon what the army rule does and overall what you're going to be doing. The Death Guard are one of the factions from Chaos that I do want to try at some point. I've list built an army for them before. This was before their codex went live, so I'd have to either remake it or update it if I still have it. I don't recall if I do. On the topic of like, a little bit of the hobbying aspect of them, they are definitely one of the armies where I look at them with like their models and I'm just like, ooh, painting them might be a little nightmarish. Maybe not as bad as painting Admech, like because I know the Mechanicus are definitely can be a nightmare to assemble and paint just because of how small they are, or how spindly they have some bits of, or just what is what color. But the Death Guard being, you have metal, you have trim, you have cloth in some cases, you have bone, you have skin, horns, eyes. It's very much out there, and I can definitely see that being kind of daunting and a little bit testing. Next is the Emperor's Children, the newest of the Chaos Cult armies to be fully introduced as their own faction. I know with their models, I really like how they look. The Emperor's Children models look really nice. They look very clean. Like, for them being a Chaos Cult army and, a Chaos Space Marines, effectively, their models are not very spiky. They're not super, like, oh god, it's very clearly, chaos. Like, yeah, you can tell that, there's clearly chaos stuff, but they look clean. And to that point, with their models and stuff, like, I got the Champions of Slaanesh box, as thanks to my dad when we went to a local game store. And after getting the models out, assembling them, priming them, I have only painted the Lord Exultant. I have not painted the rest of them. I can look at them and just be like, if I really wanted to, like, I could use the Tormentors and Infractors as Chosens or Legionnaires for Chaos Space Marines. Right, and that's the thing, and the same thing goes like the Lord Exultant. Like, if you wanted to use him as a proxy for a Chaos Lord, you could do that. They're the same base size, and they still look sufficiently chaos looking. You could do that, and I think that that's really cool. And then Noise Marines look really cool, like really sick. Lucius the Eternal is a good looking model, though not my favorite. Fulgrim looks really good, though I do prefer his Horus Heresy sculpt. But moving on to their army rule. I think their army rule is really good. It definitely plays into the whole thing of they're a thrill-seeking army. They want to go off, move on to the next high, and so given how their army rule, allows them to advance and charge on a turn and shoot and charge in a turn in which they advanced and fell back, plays into that, and then the extra stipulations of like, hey, they can't that selected unit that's doing the shooting and charging can't target the same thing if you want to get benefit of the army rule, or they can't target something else that has been charged by another unit of yours. So I get it. It makes sense. It makes them faster, makes all of their units fast, generally speaking, pretty fast, and being able to move up the board. Moving back to talking about Fulgrim, it is kind of disappointing how bad he is. Like, I get it. Not every Demon Primarch can be built the same, and not all of them are going to be the same and be as powerful as one another. But it is kind of disappointing from what I've seen of just like what he can do, his points costs, and then just like functioning what you'd want to try to use him for. Because at that point, if you want an epic hero kind of character, why not just take Lucius? He's a far better character who can lead things and can really screw things up like in combat. And to the end, the Emperor's Children are an army that I at some point want to give a try. Still not entirely certain as to like what detachment I'd want to try with them, and this is mainly coming from the perspective of like I own their models, or I own some of their models, so I do want to give it a try. I do want to give it a go, see if I like them more than other factions, and like fully decide, yeah, I want more of these guys. Next up is the Thousand Sons, my least favorite faction to fight in Space Marine 2. My brain is too smooth for their army rule. The way that their rituals and their spells work, in the Cabal points system, is kind of complicated to me. I'm sure it is not as complicated in practice, and if there is one thing I do understand and can grasp pretty confidently with their army rule, it's you want more sorcerers, because the more sorcerers you have in your army, the more Cabal points you'll get to use. So like that makes that I understand that. But just the whole Cabal points system, besides that, is little confusing. I would need to stop and like truly reread them and understand it. But beyond their rules, I think their army just overall looks really good. Even the Zongors, which I hate, I really dislike Zongors, but in Space Marine 2 and in tabletop, I do not like them. I think that of the Thousand Suns models and like of their unit range, Thousand Suns have really ugly battle line units of Zongors and the Zongor Enlightened. I think the Rubric Marines and Scarab Cult Terminators look really good. I think, you know, the Sorcerers look good. Obviously, Ahriman is a great looking model. The Infernal Master, all of them, absolutely spectacular. With regards to like their data sheets, or if I can briefly touch on their data sheets, I think that they're perfectly fine for them being, if I'm not mistaken, a slightly slower army of Space Marines. I think that's perfectly fine, given, you know, lore implication, you know, the context of lore, but then also like they're a primarily shooting oriented army with their psychic shooting, you know, their spells, and you know, at some point, you know, to that, you know, and you're capping this off. At some point, I do want to give the Thousand Suns a try, but their army rule is the main deterrence for me, and you know, once I can kind of work that like around and figure that out, then yeah, I'll definitely look to list build, get something going, and just see, hey, do I like a slightly more shooting focused Space Marine army than a more melee one? Because I mostly played melee focused armies. But speaking of melee focused armies, as we talking about the World Eaters, I think overall all the World Eater models, you know, Berserkers, 8-bound, Exalted 8-bound, Karn the Betrayer, the Slaughterbound, they all look really, really good. I know from what I've seen of their data sheets post Codex release, they are the fastest Space Marine profile army in the game, because if I'm not mistaken, most of their units have 2 inches more movement than their equivalents in other Marine armies. Their army rule just is simple. Roll 8d6, and then, you know, you can take however many quantities of what numbers that you rolled, and you can activate 2 Blessings of Khorne. And simple. I know that when their codex came out, some of the blessings got nerfed or removed. I know that Angron got nerfed, but that's fine. If I were to play World Eaters, I wouldn't use Angron. I would, if anything, only use Karn if I had to use an epic hero. I know Karn got buffed. I know he became more scary and having the possibility of just not dying. You know, and 100%, like, if there was a definitive, like, this is an army I will be trying the next time, or like when I move on to like wanting to really, really give something a go, it will be World Eaters. Right? I already know that I really like melee. I already like their army rule. I already like their models. You know, might as well give them a really fair shake and a really good try. And you know, and chances are it's going to go well. It's probably not going to be all too different than the kind of armies I've, you know, already played with Emperors, with Creations of Bile, Chaos Space Marines. It's probably just going to be somewhat similar, but like to the max, you know, to the extreme. But with that, guys, that'll be the end of my little presentation and video. I very much appreciate you guys for sticking around and watching. Feel free to comment down below what your thoughts are of the different armies that I talked about, you know, within Chaos, and what kind of experiences you've had with these different armies. Whether you play these armies, or you play Chaos Space Marines, or someone in your group tends to play these armies a lot, or one of these armies a lot. Feel free to let me know what kind of experiences you've had, good or bad. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. And yeah, guys, with that, thank you all for watching. Very much appreciate it. Feel free to like and subscribe. It helps me know that everyone who comes by and sticks around likes to view this kind of content. But until next time, hope you guys have a good one, a great time wherever you may be finding yourselves. And if not, I hope things can go better. But until the next time, see you guys later. Peace.